All right, everyone, welcome to the Sports Degenerates podcast. Today we have a very special guest, the longtime Boston sports reporter for Channel 5 News, Mike Lynch. Mike, how you doing?
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me on this morning. I got my vest on because I'm in the basement and I forgot to put the heat on last night. So I may shed it as we go.
Yeah, no problem. So how have you been recently? I mean, obviously the world is kind of crazy right now, but how have you been personally?
Yeah, see my swirling my thumbs. That's kind of like how I've been in the sports world because everything came to a stop, as we all know, pretty much in March. Things have picked up a little bit, but they're different now. You know, the NFL's playing, baseball got through, basketball did a good job. So did the National Hockey League, but we can't go out and interact with the athletes anymore, all the way from the professionals, the college, and the high school. And that's a big part. You know, I mean, you can Zoom all you want, but you know, when you go out to a field and you're talking to a young high school soccer player or a football player, you know, with an interview, it's a little bit more personal, and you might get a little bit more out of them than you get, you know, sitting with the Zoom. But I think Zoom is here to stay for a long, long time.
Couldn't agree more. Now, let's get into some things. I want to talk first about the Patriots. So, I'll let Matt ask you a question about Sunday.
Yeah, so I didn't think their win on Sunday was any good, really. Not that significant for them right now. You know, it was over the Cardinals, sure, but kind of I thought both teams looked like they wanted to lose the game. Like they were trying to toss it away. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I think they played less worse than the Cardinals did down the stretch.
Yeah,
I want to
score
say
would show that. Yeah.
didn't play good enough to win. They played less worse than the Cardinals did. Now, remember, they did have two great goal line stands. One of them right at the end of halftime, and that was a big defensive stand for them right there. They got a bad call on the punt return. There's no way that was a blindside block. They did get a field goal out of it, so basically they lost 4 points out of it right there. But I think you're right, Matt, that there's concern about the quarterback. I mean, he doesn't look like he's a guy that can, you know, when Tom Brady got the ball with 1:34 to go on his own 18-yard line, you said, okay, well, at least they're going to get 3 out of this. They may get 6 out of this. But you knew Brady was going to get them down into the red zone. And you just don't have that feeling when Cam Newton has the football. I was cutting him some slack in the 2 games, the Denver and the San Francisco game, because there were the 2 games he came back after COVID. And you know, I've talked to a couple of people that have had COVID, and they said, you know, they're just woozy for months afterwards. And this was only a couple of weeks after he tested positive. So, you know, it affects your cognitive skills and your reaction skills and your coordination a little bit. But he's just got to get rid of the football. And a guy that's 6'5", I've never seen a guy have more balls batted down than Cam Newton. I mean, you know, I think he delivers a little bit like, you know, 3-quarter delivery instead of delivering over the top. And, you know, I mean, Kyler Murray's got to be, you know, 6 inches shorter than he is, and he rarely gets a ball batted down at all. So that's a big problem right out of the chute. I think the 3rd play of the game, they had a ball batted down and Arizona intercepted it. But the Patriots have their work cut out for them. You know, the only thing I was looking at the schedule and the standings in the AFC, and I saw that. So right now the Patriots are number 10, number 9 are the Raiders, and number 8 is Baltimore. So if they get into a tiebreaker with those two, they beat them head to head. 7 teams make the playoffs instead of 6. The only problem is the Colts are in there at number 7, and the Colts have 2 games against Houston, 1 against the Raiders, and 1 against Jacksonville. So I think a lot can play out here. You know, Belichick's a great December coach. Let's see what he, what he can do with this club. He doesn't have Tom Brady for the first time, but his teams do play well in the month of December.
Yeah. And you kind of mentioned with Cam how not very good he's been playing. And specifically, you said how like his release is kind of like that sidearm type thing. Yeah. And it's almost night and day going from Tom Brady to Cam Newton. Tom Brady's delivery was you blink and you miss it. Cam Newton, it feels like his delivery to get rid of the ball takes forever. I don't want to see Cam Newton on this team past this year unless he's just possibly competing for the next quarterback, kind of helping them out or something like that. What do you think Cam is the QB of the future?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a 1-year rental. for the Patriots. They're going to rent him for this year. Hey, thanks, Cam, for what you did. And they're either going to make a deal. I think Sam Darnold's going to be available if the Jets go in the tank and they take Trevor Lawrence. And I think that might be the way they may go. I don't know if Jared Stidham is the guy, if he's the answer. The only way you'll see Stidham play is if A, Newton gets hurt, or B, the Patriots are mathematically eliminated. Yeah. So I think that's a big question mark right now. Who's going to be the quarterback? I don't think it's going to be Cam Newton. I think that his age and his prior injuries and his indecision has really hurt him. Brady told me something about 4 or 5 years ago. I said, how are you feeling? After on Mondays after games, you're now 40 years old, or 39, 40 years old. He says, I feel better than I did when I was 25. He says, you know why? He says, I just developed this technique. When I see that I'm going to get hit, and I just throw a one hopper to the receiver. I know it's not going to be complete, but I don't get hit and I don't get sacked. And okay, so we just have to play. We lose it down and we don't gain any yardage. So rather than just sit there and get pounded and take the sack and lose 12 yards, or try to sprint out and try to force a ball in there, he'd throw these one hoppers. He would just see that the rush was coming and there was some type of blitz, and boom, he would just throw it, and you'd see the ball bounce 5 feet in front of the receiver. And at first people saying, what the heck is he doing? He can't throw the ball 20 yards to this guy? No, he's doing it to avoid getting hurt and basically extending his career and feeling better on Monday, which makes them feel better on Wednesday when they have their real first hard practice.
That's a good point. I never really thought about that. That makes so much sense, though, now that you say that, because the amount of times that, like you said, I've seen Brady do that, it makes so much sense now why he was doing it. But what do you think the Patriots should do moving forward next year at quarterback? I really wanted them, personally, I didn't want them to do very well this season. I wanted them to get one of the top quarterbacks, not necessarily Trevor Lawrence, but I wanted them to get a quarterback in the draft. But it doesn't look like they're going to have a shot at one of the top maybe 2-3 quarterbacks at this point. So what do you think they should do? Obviously, I've heard Matthew Stafford. I would love Matthew Stafford personally. And you said Sam Darnold. What would you prefer?
I would rather have I think there's more upside on Sam Darnold. Matthew Stafford, I just think, is overrated and overpaid. I just don't want him in here. I mean, he's played in 3 playoff games in his career. He's 0 for 3 in the playoff game. Now, granted, he plays for the Lions, which one of the worst franchises in your lifetimes and in mine as well. They just haven't been good. I think there's a little bit of an upside with Darnold. He's playing on a crappy team like Stafford has, but Stafford has had some great receivers. Remember, he had Megatron for a long time, and he's got some pretty good weapons right now. So, I mean, I don't know if Darnold's the guy. I don't know if the Jets would make a deal with Bill Belichick, but he's one name that keeps popping up with people I talk to all the time. They think there's a lot of upside with Darnold. He's had some injuries, and he's played with a crappy team for a year and a half.
Yeah, I agree. I think Darnold could be definitely a good option because, like you said, he has more potential. He's a younger quarterback. I mean, he only came into the NFL, 3-4 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I think only 2? Yeah.
I think second year, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense. And so I just feel like he has a good chance to be a much better quarterback than he is. And I think a big reason why he hasn't been playing that great is because he's been on the Jets. So I think put him with the right coaching like Belichick and stuff, he could be a lot better.
No, I agree. And if they get Trevor Lawrence, they're going to unload Darnold, and they can get something for him. And the Patriots, might be willing. And remember, the Patriots have 8 guys that opted out this year because of COVID. Guys that will be back. They might not all be back next year. Some of them might probably be retired or won't be invited back by the Patriots if their contract expires. But I think as long as Bill Belichick's around, there's a chance for success around here.
Yeah, I totally agree. And now, speaking of how they've been playing, personally, like I said, I wanted them to, once I started seeing how they were playing kind of in the middle of the season, that they weren't playing very well, I didn't necessarily want them to tank.
Yeah.
But I wanted them to play worse.
Yes, you did. You want them to tank because you want them to get Trevor down in Clemson, right?
Yeah, of course. But actually, I did.
You wanted them to get the number 1 pick and then or make a deal to get the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
And get Trevor Lawrence.
I mean, I did say on the podcast a few weeks ago, I said I would love Trevor Lawrence, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I wanted Justin Fields because I think he's going probably in the top 5. So I wanted to at least get in the top 5 of the draft. That looks like it's out of the window now.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
do you think right now for them, if they're not able to turn it on, they're going to be a middle team in the NFL right now. They're not going to have a top 10 pick. They're not going to have the end of the first round pick. They're going to be almost squarely in the middle. Do you think that's helping them possibly? Because, I mean, I feel like it could be good that they're not bad, but also it could be bad that they're not playing bad. Do you think it's helping them or hurting them that they're going to be a middle team this year?
Well, let's keep in mind that they always had the last pick or next to last pick in most of the
Mhm.
drafts over the last 20 years because they either won the Super Bowl or were in the Super Bowl or we're in the AFC Championship. So as long as Belichick's around, he's always hunting and scouting, and Nick Caserio is always Nick Caserio is already thinking about next year right now.
Yeah.
He's watching all these college games. They've got their scouts out there, and Belichick once told me that he could, not his, it said we could stock the entire NFL draft right out of the Southeast Conference. I said, you mean your first 7 round picks? He goes, no, the entire National Football League could stock the draft right out of the Southeast Conference. So, and Bill's been a big Southeast Conference guy, as you know, over the years, guys that he's selected out of there. And as long as he's around and he has a quarterback that's serviceable, that can execute what he wants, they're going to be in the hunt. So I don't think it's going to hurt them at all. I mean, I think that this is a pretty good draft coming up right now. I think it's pretty deep, and I think time will tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like right now they have a couple positions to fill. Look for guys even outside of quarterback. A big one that we've talked about in this podcast is wide receiver, of course.
Yeah.
But and I agree with that. I think that's their big priority. But what do you think some of their top priorities should be in the off season, even beyond the draft?
I think it's wide receivers is their biggest problem. I mean, these guys, you hear about this term all the time, creating separation. And there were guys like when Julian Edelman was around, Julian Edelman would he wouldn't run and try to shake a defender loose. He would run to open space.
Yeah.
And Brady knew he was going to do that. And Brady would come up and Brady would say, okay, there's going to be a seam or an open space over here. And instead of running like a down and out or a button hook, as we say, or a curl, he would just run to an open space. And sometimes he would just run 2 yards off the line of scrimmage and Brady would hit him right away. And then he would just maneuver and pick up, 10 to 12 yards after a catch. So that all comes with experience. And sometimes it's something you develop when you're playing touch football games in the backyard and all the way through high school. You mean just try to shake a defender and get away from him and making up plays as you go. So the Patriots have some athletic guys, but they're a little bit robotic in how they run their routes right now. They run that. And Belichick has this, great, a couple of times they showed a replay and there'd be like 2 Patriot receivers in the same area with 2 defenders. And Belichick would always yell at them in practice. He says, this is Jeepers Creepers. This isn't a good GD team meeting over here. He says, get away from each other, pretend just yell poison, get away from each other. And that's what he always had when he had, the Troy Browns and the Wes Welkers and, the Danny Amendolars and even Gronkowski and guys like that. These guys knew separation because, the closer you get to one another, it easier it is for the defense. The more separation you have from your teammate as well as a defensive back, the easier it is for the quarterback not only to throw the ball, but for the quarterback to see. He's looking into a blur. Remember, ground level is a lot different than we watch the game on TV or sitting up in the press box. It's a hard game, and if you've got people spread out, it's much easier to throw the football, complete the football, and pick up chunk yardage, as they say.
Yeah. Another thing that I've been worried about, like you said, you think wide receiver is definitely a big need. The defense, I think, has been kind of underperforming. I think part of that is because they lost a lot more players on the defensive side because of COVID.
Yep. Right.
But does that worry you? Do you think that they need to pick anybody up on defense?
Well, I like Winovich out of Michigan. I think he's really coming to his own. He's getting some great reps. And remember, a lot of these guys, and this applies to the whole league, not just the Patriots, but some teams have a lot of veteran players. There were no OTAs. There was no mini camps. There was no preseason, and there were no exhibition games. And if you've got a young defense and guys that are stepping in for guys that opted out, this is valuable time. Belichick, everyone hates preseason games because the first team only plays one series or a quarter or whatever. But Belichick loves preseason because he says it's the only way you can really evaluate young guys under fire. And everyone can look good in practice. Everybody can be an All-American and an All-Pro in practice. But as both Belichick says, let's see how they play when the real bullets start flying. And none of those guys had that opportunity this off season. So basically, once the season started, this was their OTA, mini camp, training camp, and preseason all condensed into one. It was, you're out there and let's go fight. So it's sort of by trial and error.
Yeah, one position that I think is not a priority for them too is running back. I wanted to talk about Damian Harris a little bit. Tyler and I and a lot of the people we're friends with were pretty high on him. I don't think a lot of people are talking about him yet, but could you see him being a top running back in a couple of years?
Yeah, I think that Chris Collinsworth made a great point on one of the games. He said, if I was an NFL player personnel right now, I would draft Alabama's first string, second string, and third string running backs and put them and put them in my lineup right now. So Harris is another one of those long line of good power runners from Alabama. And I think, Sony Michel coming back from an injury, he's a good player. And of course you get James White, who I think has been underutilized this year. And he was such a weapon with Tom Brady. He was unstoppable on third down. And I don't even see him on the field as much as I would like to see him on the field. So I think they're pretty solid at running back there. I think they missed James Devlin a lot when he played that fullback position. They got the new guy in there now who's playing, who's learning and doing a pretty good job of it. But I think they're pretty set at running back. The place at the offensive line, not too bad. Tight end hasn't become a focal point of their offensive attack right now. And so I think, quarterback is wide receiver is number one thing to address, and quarterback would be number two.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, yeah, thinking of James White, it was a couple Super Bowls ago. He had like a hat trick, right? Like 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, there was that comeback against Atlanta down in Houston, and he scored the game winner in overtime. But he was unstoppable, and I think he had 14 receptions in that game, and he probably should have got the MVP award.
Yeah, they gave it to Brady instead, of course, as they normally do with the quarterbacks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he certainly was unstoppable with Brady. Now, speaking of Brady too, I want to talk about him a little bit too. Of course, he's down south now. We all, hate it up here. But the Bucks, they were looking pretty good for a little bit, and they're sort of on a decline now. They're showing their flaws. What do you think? Do you think they're as bad as they've been playing?
Yeah, I don't think they have a great defense. I don't think they have a great secondary. I think that's their. When I first watched them play the first couple of games, I said what they should do is talk Dante Scarnecchia out of retirement, get him down to Tampa, and have him coach the offensive line because they couldn't protect Brady worth a lick. Then they started protecting Brady, and then the secondary sort of fell apart. And then lately, it looks like Tom has taken an awful lot of pressure down there. What is that? They're off this week, and then they have the Vikings. They have 2 games against the Falcons and 1 game against the Lions. So other than the Vikings game, which would be a home game, they can beat Atlanta twice and they can beat the Lions. But they're not a lock to make the Super Bowl. There's so many good teams in the NFC right now, as well as the AFC. The AFC is really teams that were usually dead and buried by this point, like the Dolphins and the Bills and the Browns, are all playoff contenders that are all ahead of the Patriots right now. And whoever thought we'd see the day, when the Cleveland Browns and the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills would be ahead of the Patriots in the AFC.
Even the Raiders too.
Yeah, right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of the Bucks, Mike, do you think their struggles is more Brady kind of declining, or do you think it's more of a matter of coaching?
Bruce Arians might be a tad overrated. Maybe I get the sense that Tom is calling a lot of the plays down there, and there's got to be a boss. They can't be co-bosses. They can't be, co-presidents, co-chief executive officers. There's got to be one boss. It's either got to be the head coach or the offensive coordinator. It can't be the quarterback. Even Drew Brees, as experienced as he is, takes orders from Sean Payton. And the same thing with, I know that Rodgers had some problems with Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. Now maybe we know why when we see what's happened to him down in Dallas. But I think there's got to be a guy, and Belichick was the guy. He was the boss, and Josh McDaniels called the plays, and Tom could check off if he wanted to. But I just get the feeling that no one knows who the real boss is with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, I totally agree, because multiple times you've seen Arians come out and say, "Oh, the quarterback can only play so well," all this, but also at a point he has to see that he's not putting Brady in a good situation. He has to
Correct.
decide, all right, I'm going to start giving you the plays that I want. And I was listening to Sports Talk Radio yesterday, and they were saying how someone who's connected to the Bucks organization was saying how Brady ideally wants to be shotgun and like four wide, whereas Arians wants to have him more under center. And so
Yeah.
that right now it seems like there's kind of a power struggle there where and it's been shown that when Brady's under center this season, he's been playing better.
Yeah.
Whereas he wants to be
Yeah,
in
he has. He's that guy Jones is a heck of a running back, and when you're under center, I mean, when you're in shotgun, everybody knows it's going to be a pass. And when you're in shotgun and you've got a mobile quarterback, like Lamar down in Baltimore, when you have Patrick Mahomes, you have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, he could run, he could flip the option, it could be an inside option, but when Brady's in shotgun, he's not running with a football. All right, we all know that. The only time he's running with a football is a quarterback sneak under center, and he dives forward, which is something he's pretty good at. So I agree on that. You got to mix it up a little bit because your linebackers can just tee off on you if you're lined up in shotgun the entire time. And that guy's a pretty good running back. I think they ought to utilize him a little bit more.
Yeah. And now I kind of want to move on a little bit to the NBA and the Celtics. So
Sure.
speaking
I
of,
got to toss one in there.
yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
Again, the last two. What's that?
I'm looking at the Chiefs, T-shirt right here. I was going to say that, but that's okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, against my Chiefs, we saw Brady make a couple just dumb interceptions. Should we be worried about him?
Yeah, well, it's, see, a lot of those things, he's very demanding of his receivers and knowing where they should be, and he knows exactly where they're going to be in every single play. And he gets, he gets in shouting matches and screaming matches with receivers if they're not where they're supposed to be. And so I'm going to hang those on the receivers and not so much on Tom Brady. And you can just see it in his eyes when he comes back on the sidelines. He knows that this guy was supposed to be a back shoulder throw, and this guy, instead of that, he's inside the defender down the sideline when he's supposed to be outside the defender, and you just have nothing but the space and the sideline between them. And that's been a big problem with young receivers with Tom Brady's over the years. Like, with N'Keal Harry last year, he had no confidence in him. Brady with N'Keal Harry. When Chad Ochocinco came here, he just couldn't grasp everything, and Brady, had no use for him at all. He said, "You might as well be invisible while you're out there. I'm not going to throw you the football." So I think a lot of that is, and again, this goes back to OTAs, mini camp, training camp, all the stuff that you work out then. So when you're ready to go, the first weekend in September, you're ready. All that stuff is buffed and polished and ready to go.
Yeah, Matt, do you have any more Chiefs questions for him?
No, I just
teams growing up, by the way.
Were you?
Really?
Yep.
Huh. Yeah, I've been a big fan of them with family out there, but no questions. Just I love Patrick Mahomes, like we were saying, he could do it all.
You got a good one. He is fun to. He's must-see TV when they're on.
Yeah, he really is the quarterback of the future. I mean, he's going to shatter records. He's going to shatter Brady's records. He's going to shatter Manning and Brees records. The pace that he's going.
Everybody's records. He's spectacular. I mean, you guys weren't too young to remember when Doug Flutie was playing at BC. He's a modern day version of Doug Flutie. I mean, he does everything that Flutie used to do. All these unconventional throws, like you think he's going to scramble at the last minute, he just flips a little forward pitch. As long as you're behind the line of scrimmage, you can throw it between your legs, around your back, anywhere you want. And he does that. And, he sells the run, and the defensive player comes up and he just, throws it 5 yards, and that turns the 5 yard gain into a 20 yards, especially with Hill. Boy, does that guy got some jets.
You
Yeah,
can say that again.
man.
Um,
Talking about quarterback vision too, like,
Yeah.
talking about it looks different on TV, of course, as it does on the field. I can't imagine how, from eye level, you see Hill 50 yards down the field and know you have
Yeah.
to throw it 10 yards in front of him and still make it perfect. I don't know how any quarterback does that.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, those guys have been together for like 3 or 4 years, so, and it just seems that the teams that have been together for a while are doing better this year. They didn't need the camp and the preseason as much as people that don't know each other, like Brady and his Buccaneer teammates, like Cam Newton and his Patriots teammates.
yeah, and I think that's probably a big reason why the Steelers are playing so well too.
Yeah,
This,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, they're
um,
intact. Same thing at Tennessee Titans. Same team. They're intact. The one team that's surprising me like that are the Colts a little bit, because Philip Rivers is new and he came in, so he sort of debunks that theory I just threw out there. But I think for the most part, that's the rule rather than the exception.
definitely. So yeah, let's move on to the Celtics a little bit now.
Sure.
I was listening again to Sports Talk Radio yesterday, as I do a lot, and they
Not
were
much schoolwork being done up there at Keene State, I guess. Huh?
they were roasting Danny Ainge. They were saying that he's making a bunch of excuses because he gave a soundbite saying that with a sign and trade they can only execute it if the player wants to go to the specific team, and so he was kind of insinuating that Gordon Hayward didn't want to go to the Pacers. Do you think
Yeah.
Danny Ainge is starting to make some excuses? I don't think so. I think it's being played up. I think he's being honest, honestly.
I think Danny is. I don't think he's making excuses. I think he's done a pretty good job. I mean, look at this lineup right now. But let's just, even before Gordon Hayward left for Charlotte, look at the people that he's got. That he either signed through free agency or made deals for. I mean, the Jason Tatum draft was spectacular draft. Jaylen Brown, spectacular draft. I think bringing Kemba Walker in here, although the injuries have really kept him out of a major party. I think he's been off the court more than he's been on the court, and now he's not going to be able to play until January with that stem cell injection in his knee. But I think Enes Kanter was a mistake. He really wasn't a major contributor last year. They still need a guy that is going to just deter people from coming down the lane full speed. There's just got to be a banger in there that's going to knock people around and get some rebounds. Now their perimeter guys are fine. I mean, they got guys that can knock down shots and compete with anybody in the league except maybe the Miami Heat. But boy, I'll tell you, what a fun team to watch they were in the Eastern Conference Finals. So no, I think Danny's doing a good job. I think he's doing a good job.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see if the Celtics are going to be better or worse this season, because, of course, they're still almost that same team that made the ECF minus Gordon Hayward, but now they've added Tristan Thompson and Jeff Teague. I think Tristan Thompson is huge at center.
Yeah.
You think they'll be able to make that one more step forward this year?
Well, yeah, I think of when Jeff Teague played for the Hawks against the Celtics in the playoffs. I said, Jesus, guy's a pain in the neck. I think he'd look good in a Celtics uniform. And the same thing with Tristan Thompson. I mean, you had Kyrie Irving and LeBron when they were playing the Cavaliers. But there was one guy that was always pretty tough, and it was Tristan Thompson. And I said, boy, I think he's a typical Celtic, and he'd look good in a Celtics uniform. And I think Danny thinks the same way. We all see guys on other teams that are good or kind of a pain in the neck, and you said, you know what? He's the type of guy that, like, you can't stand him if he's your opponent, but you love him if he's on your team. And I think that Teague and Thompson are two of those guys that will help the Celtics. I think Teague's a veteran guy. I think he's about 32 years old, but he's going to help. And and Thompson, I think, is a guy that's a great guy to have in that role, which I just described right there. So I think it'll be fun going forward. It's a little bit of a condensed year. Let's keep in mind that they're not in the bubble, so they're going to be subject to all these random positive tests that we saw when baseball started.
Yeah.
That we're seeing in the National Football League right now. Hockey and basketball didn't have to deal with that because the bubble worked perfectly, for both those leagues. So, get ready to rock and roll here because there's only 12 guys on a basketball team, it's 53 in a football team, so you can survive 1 to 2, 3 positive tests. But in basketball, you get 2, 3, 4 positive tests. Look out.
Yeah.
Unless you're the Ravens.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, I think a possible good thing for the Celtics is how many decent players are going to have on the Red Claws. So if they do test positive, I mean, they have some players that they could possibly bring up, but yeah, it could be hard. Now we mentioned how they lost Gordon Hayward, they added Tristan Thompson, they added Jeff Teague. With the team right now, I think they could be pretty good. Do you think they need to add another star? I'm kind of torn on it because I think Tatum and Brown have an opportunity to take the next step. And I think they can be the stars in this team, but a lot of people are saying they think that the Celtics need another star to get over the hump.
Well, remember Brown really pouted when his role was cut back. Was it the beginning of not this past season? Or maybe it was the beginning of this past season. I can't remember, but he had a great role in the playoffs the previous spring, and then his role was sort of diminished a little bit, and he was pouting, and he was a little bit, I'm not getting the rock enough, and those lines. I'm not getting enough touches. Remember that became the catchphrase,
Yep.
and so I think I think those two guys are money. They're money shooters. I think that they're clutch players. I think they're becoming leaders. I mean, Tatum whines to officials a little bit too much. That doesn't help him because he doesn't get the benefit of a call down the stretch. It's going to go to a veteran guy rather than a guy that's whining all the time. There's nothing you can do. You're not going to change the officials' minds by whining all the time. Just use that energy to play defense and to just okay, I fouled somebody. Let's get on with this. But I think those two guys are great, and that's probably one of the reasons that Hayward left, because I don't think he saw his role as being that big. He was probably the third or fourth option on offense, and that's not what he's been used to in his college career and when he was playing his first 4 years in the NBA.
Yeah, definitely. Another question I want to ask you too is earlier this offseason, they kind of died down now, is the trade rumors for James Harden. Would you want to see him in a Celtics uniform?
Well, I think it'd really tick off Tatum and Jaylen Brown if he was in, because that ball does not leave his hands when he crosses half court. It just does not. He just goes into a one-on-one game and tries to work and try to get the best shot if he can. He makes a lot of his passes when he's in the air. He goes up to shoot and he says, "Oh, it's going to get blocked," and he makes his pass like that. I think that you got to build a team around him of guys that are good rebounders and good defensive players. And if you've got some other guys that are scorers and can be stars in this league, like Tatum and like Jaylen Brown, I don't think there's room for a guy for the style of play of a James Harden.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, me and Matt have had this argument the past 3 weeks now. We've talked about if Harden goes to the Nets, I don't think it would work because like you said, Harden needs the ball in his hand. He'd be with two players that are the same exact way.
Rain.
Absolutely.
That'd be a rain.
Yeah, Matt thinks that it's just too much talent for them to lose. I just don't think chemistry-wise and the way that they play, I don't think they would work out. What do you think?
I agree 100%. It's everything I was just talking about the Celtics. Multiply it by 10 if he goes to the Nets. There'd be fistfights, there'd be arguments in the huddle, and it would be awful. It's like we've all played pickup basketball with guys in the gym or on the playground, and these guys are ball hogs, hungos, and you just you'd say, "What am I out here for? Throw me the damn ball." The guy gets double team. I'm sitting all right here in the corner all by myself, and the same applies. I mean, the NBA. It's basically turned into a pickup game all the time. It's turned into a one-on-one game. Very few teams are very good at playing team offensive basketball, except for the Miami Heat, which I found to be a fun team to watch when last spring, and they surprised me because I think they snuck up on me. I think they snuck up on the Celtics a little bit too, because the Celtics hadn't seen them in a long time, and I think they snuck up on ESPN as well. I think they're fully expecting, a Boston, Los Angeles, NBA final down in Disney World. But they're not going to sneak up on anybody anymore. They're a good team.
No, at this point right now, I personally put them over I put the Heat over the Celtics. At the moment, I think the Celtics have more talent than the Heat, but
Yeah.
just simply because they were able to beat them and pretty much out heart them.
Yeah,
Um, I kind of give them the edge right now over the Celtics.
I do too. And what's his name? The 3-point bomber from
Oh
uh, he went to Phillips Exeter.
yeah, I'm blanking on his
55.
name. Yep.
I'm blinking.
Was that
Duncan
Robinson?
Robinson.
Yep.
Duncan Robinson. Duncan Robinson. Yeah, I mean he's this guy. I mean he's a great streak shooter. You know, he's
Yeah.
and he can light it up. This kid, remember the Hero? How about the game that Hero had in one of the games against the Celtics?
Hmm.
Almost had 40. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. The kid out of Georgetown up front. I mean, that's a good basketball team. Kentucky, rather. Two of those guys are from Kentucky, I think.
Yeah.
It's tough to keep track of Kentucky because everybody's one and done. Did they really go to Kentucky, or did they just sort of just skip Kentucky and go right to the NBA and say they were going to go to Kentucky? I think Miami's they won the East, and I think they're the team to beat in the East right now until proven otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. And now, one last Celtics question before we kind of start wrapping this up
Hey,
is over the past 8 years, the Celtics have obviously kind of rebuilt the team, and there's been a lot of cases where their original plans kind of fell apart. Specifically, to think of is some of the draft picks. Yeah, they hit on Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown, but Danny Ainge packaged some of them and tried to get more picks down the line, and a lot of those picks ended up, specifically with Memphis, ended up being later lottery. Do you think that some of these plans that kind of fell apart to no fault of their own have kind of hurt them at all?
well, I think the Kyrie Irving move set them back
Yeah,
a couple of years. You know, he came in and he was such a Celtic killer when he was on Cleveland, and they should have known that this guy was a bad apple. You know, the way he interacted with LeBron and some of his other teammates. But sometimes a new environment changes a person,
yeah,
and they basically rolled the dice with Kyrie Irving, and it failed. So they lost that entire year, and I think they lost a lot of last year too. They brought Kemba in, but Kemba had that knee injury, so I think that set their plan back by about a year and a half. I think that was one of the big problems.
yeah.
Yeah. Man, I'll be excited to see how the Celtics look this year, and the East too. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be. The East has all of a sudden gotten pretty strong. It used to be. I mean, and one of the team that disappoints me the most though is the 76ers. I mean, I don't know how the heck they let Jimmy Butler go and how they dealt him away. I mean, this guy, is money in the bank. Another great player for the Miami Heat. The Heat, I like the Heat. I like watching the Heat too. I'm an old-fashioned guy that likes to see the ball moved around and distributed, rather than just the one-on-one game, back somebody in and everyone else clear the side. And the Miami, they run the ball well. They have a great half-court offense, and they play basketball like kind of, I don't want to say the old-fashioned way, but the fun way to watch, the way you still play if you're on the playground or in the gym up there at Keene State.
Yeah, I totally agree. They definitely play basketball, in my opinion, how it's supposed to be played, not the just coming up to the 3-point line, chucking it, and running
Yeah,
back on defense. And I love watching them play.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you could get on the YMCA and see a game like that, couldn't
Exactly.
Yeah,
you?
super fun. Only it's an NBA team. Love it. Now, so the last question, at least for now, that we have in mind, I always love asking this one. We've had a couple other, legendary sports reporters on here. Butch Stearns told us about getting to know Bobby Orr. We had Bob Halloran tell us about running around the Cardinals Stadium during the Super Bowl looking for his live shot. So I want to ask you, Mike, about over your years, some of your favorite or most memorable sports journalism moment or the thing about your career that just stands out the most.
Well, it's kind of, I never lost sight of how lucky I was to have this job. I grew up in Swampscott, Mass. I went to college in Boston, and I would stand like on a Super Bowl and said, "Wow, I can't believe it." I know I've been to like 11 of these, but I can't believe I'm actually here standing on the field in the Super Bowl or standing on the court at an NBA final, at a Stanley Cup final, at a World Series game. Um, maybe one that stands out, when the ball went through Buckner's legs in the '86 World Series against the Mets. I was there, but I never saw it happen. It was the top of the 10th inning. The Red Sox went up 5-3. And so we were going to break. The game was on NBC. We're ABC. And Nightline came on at 11:30. So we were going to break into Nightline, something that never, ever happens before, because Ted Koppel was the king. You don't break on him. So they're up 5-3. I go all the way down to the basement of Shea Stadium, and it's just cinder blocks, and you can't hear or see anything. And there's no monitors. There's no cell phones. And I'm standing right in front of the Red Sox clubhouse, because we're going to go live right there to interview the Red Sox, who are breaking a 68-year curse and finally have won the World Series. Well, I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. I say, boy, this inning's taken an awful long time. So the locker room door opens, and Mrs. Gene Yockey, who owned the Red Sox, gets ushered out and down the hallway. Then Bob Costas comes out. He's sprinting down the hallway with a bunch of guys with lights and cameras. Then a guy comes out carrying the World Series trophy. Then they come out with this big dolly with cases of champagne. And I said, well, they must be going to a bigger room down the hall, because, maybe they can't fit everybody in the Red Sox locker room for the celebration. And then all of a sudden I hear the clanking of cleats coming down. There was a runway from the dugout into the locker room. And and all of a sudden this glove goes flying by my head, and a couple of swear words are being uttered. And the Red Sox are going down. And I said, what happened? What happened? And there was a New York City police officer who had a transistor radio right there. He says, the ball went through Buckner's legs. The Mets won. The Mets won. I said, what? I said, it was 5-3 when I came down here. What happened? He says, I don't know what happened. I'm getting static right here, but I think the Mets won 6-5, and the ball went through Buckner's legs. And so we don't break into Nightline. I have no idea it happened. It was one of the most iconic moments in World Series history. And I was at the game, all 7 games, but I never saw it because I was down outside the locker room getting ready to go live on television. I didn't see it till the new news the next day, because this was 1986. Remember, ESPN wasn't around the clock. So I had to wait for the New York City sports report to come on at noontime to actually see the ball go through Buckner's legs. And then I'm sitting in my hotel room. I said, oh, that's what happened.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's wild. It's so funny. Like all these moments in journalism and reporting, it seems like the reporters are like positioned somewhere, it's either outside the stadium or somewhere in it. I've heard so many stories of guys being at the big games and then not seeing the big moment. There was in 2003, the year before the Red Sox won it, the first time they played the Yankees, and it was Game 7, and Pedro Martinez was pitching. And so it was like 5 minutes of 11. You can't broadcast live in the stadium while the game's going on. So you have to run outside Yankee Stadium and do your live broadcast outside the truck there. And then when I finished at 11:25, I put the microphone down, I sprinted back inside the stadium, and Jorge Posada, the catcher for the Yankees, is on second base like this, and the scoreboard reads Yankees 6, Red Sox 5. I said, what happened while I was outside? I had no idea what happened. So I missed a lot of, I've been at a lot of great events, but I missed a few of them. But when Adam Vinatieri kicked the field goal to beat the Rams, and we kicked the field goal to beat Carolina and all the Patriots Super Bowls, I said, I'm not going outside. I'm not missing anything. So all those Super Bowls, I did not go outside. I stayed right inside and saw every single one of them.
That's awesome. If you have the time, I actually have one more question. Speaking of the Super Bowl, because I'm a diehard Patriots fan. Patriots are above the other Boston sports teams for me personally. What's your favorite Patriots memory that you can recollect?
Probably was when they went to their first, when they beat the Miami Dolphins in the '86 AFC Championship game. I never thought in my life. I went to the first Patriots game in 1960. They played the Broncos over at BU's Nickerson Field. Yep. I was 7 years old. So I couldn't quite figure it out. My dad took me, who was a high school coach. I couldn't figure out if it was a college team or a pro team. And then I saw all the feudal years through the 60s, through the 70s, through the 80s. And then they hadn't beaten the Dolphins in Miami for 20 years. They beat them in 1966, and for 20 straight years, every game they played in Miami, including 3 weeks before the AFC Championship game, they lost the last regular season game in Miami, so they became a wild card team, and they beat the Dolphins in Miami. It was pouring rain. I was standing on the sidelines, I said, I can't believe the Patriots are going to the friggin' Super Bowl. I can't believe they're going to the Super Bowl. And they went to the Super Bowl in New Orleans. They got crushed by the Bears, but that didn't matter. They made the Super Bowl, so they were there. That was it.
Yeah, I've heard from my dad, my grandfather, the squish the fish game, right?
Yes, exactly right. Yep, squish the fish.
And just from hearing from them, because the Patriots used to be like pretty much how the Browns are now, just a horrid franchise. And for them, it was just to be able to go to the Super Bowl. It didn't matter if they won or not. It was just we're not horrible anymore.
Here's how you watch the Patriots game for about 35 years. You'd watch it on TV. Your eyeballs would be like this. Oh, somebody returns a kickoff. He goes for a touchdown. Then you go, where's the flag? Oh, there it is. Right. Clipping 15 yards. Start your own 5-yard line. That was how you watch the Patriots game. If something bad could possibly happen, it would happen to the Patriots.
Yeah. We've been lucky the past few years for sure.
You have. You guys have no idea how lucky you are. No idea with all the teams. 86 years for the Red Sox. Forever for the Patriots. Bruins went. In 1972, they didn't win it again until like 2011, and then the Celtics had a drought from 86 to 2008. So for them, that was a long time.
Yeah.
It's wild for the Chiefs too. They went 50 years.
50 years.
My grandmother was me and Tyler's age basically the last time they won it. She's the one who lives in Kansas City. I can't imagine a lifetime of waiting.
Yeah, it happens.
Yes, it does. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure. It was so nice having you on. We really enjoyed talking with you, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Sounds good, Tyler. Tyler, Matt, thank you so much for having me, and go Keene State, all right?
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, guys.
This has been the Sports Degenerates podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.